Right now, the biggest companies on Earth are pouring somewhere north of $700 billion into artificial intelligence. That's not a typo. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Meta alone are on track to spend around $725 billion building AI in 2026, up 77% from the year before. It's the largest single-year corporate investment in human history. And yet, at the very same time, in offices you'll never see, on projects that never make the headlines, these same companies are quietly killing AI plan after AI plan. Pilots shut down. Products sunset. Data center deals torn up. Whole AI strategies quietly buried before they ever ship. So which is it? Are they betting everything on AI, or are they backing away from it? Because it can't be both. Except it is both. And once you understand why, you'll see the thing almost nobody in the hype cycle wants to say out loud. The spending and the canceling aren't a contradiction. They're the same story. And that story has some very uncomfortable cracks running through it. Let me show you where the bodies are buried. Because the first reason tech giants are quietly canceling their AI plans is the simplest and the most brutal one. Most of these projects just don't work. Not in the way anyone promised. In 2025, researchers at MIT ran one of the first serious studies into what companies were actually getting for all those billions. They looked at over 300 public AI initiatives, interviewed dozens of organizations, surveyed senior leaders, and the headline number they came back with was staggering. 95%. 95% of enterprise generative AI pilots delivered no measurable impact on the bottom line. Not a small return. No return. Only around 1 in 20 was extracting real value. The rest were expensive science experiments quietly draining budgets. Now, I want to be fair here because this is exactly the kind of scary stat that goes viral and gets stripped of all its context. That MIT report was preliminary. It wasn't peer-reviewed. Plenty of people pushed back on how it was measured, so don't treat 95% as gospel. But even the people arguing about the exact number agreed on the shape of the thing. Most corporate AI projects were failing to turn into anything real. And the reason wasn't that the AI was stupid. The models worked fine. The projects died because of everything around the model: messy workflows, no clear goal, tools that couldn't actually learn a company's specific job. In plain English, the demos looked incredible, and then reality showed up, and the research firms saw the wave coming. Gartner, one of the most listened to analyst houses on the planet, put out a prediction in June of 2025 that became one of the most quoted lines in the whole industry. Over 40% of so-called agentic AI projects, the ones where the AI is supposed to go off and complete tasks on its own, will be cancelled by the end of 2027. Cancelled, not delayed. Killed. Their reasons? Escalating costs, unclear business value, and inadequate risk controls. One of their analysts, Anushree Verma, described most of these projects as early experiments driven by hype and, in her words, often misapplied. And she pointed at something even funnier and darker, an entire industry of what she called agent washing. Vendors slapping the word agent onto what is really just an old chatbot. Gartner estimated that out of thousands of companies claiming to sell real agentic AI, only around 130 were actually building the real thing. So think about what that means. Thousands of companies, billions of dollars, and the analysts are telling you in advance that nearly half of one whole category is already dead on arrival. That's not a market. That's a graveyard with really good marketing. Which brings us to the second reason, and this is the one the giants really don't want to talk about: the economics. The money doesn't work. Running these AI systems is astonishingly expensive, and for a lot of tasks, the cost is quietly running higher than the value it produces. And you don't have to take my word for it, because it started happening inside the tech giants themselves. Take Uber. In December of 2025, Uber handed around 5,000 of its engineers access to a powerful AI coding tool. Adoption exploded by early 2026. Usage was running as high as 95% of engineers. Sounds like a triumph, right? Except by April, the finance team looked up and realized the entire year's AI budget was already gone. Not over budget, gone. So Uber did something telling. It capped each engineer at $1,500 a month of AI spend. It started rationing the miracle, and here's why that little detail matters so much. If one of the most sophisticated tech companies on Earth has to put its own engineers on an AI allowance, the cost problem isn't a glitch. It's structural. It's baked into how these systems work. Even Microsoft, one of the biggest AI spenders alive, was reported in 2026 to be pushing its own developers off certain expensive AI tools and onto cheaper in-house ones, partly to make the numbers look less insane before the quarter closed. When the house is telling its own staff to use less of the product it's selling the world, that tells you something. And this is exactly where the quiet cancellations of actual products start showing up. Google, for example, had been building an AI agent that could browse the web for you, click buttons, fill out forms, do your errands. It launched to early access, and then Google quietly sunset it. Why? Not because it couldn't work. Because sending a frontier AI model to slowly navigate a website dealing with cookie banners and pop-ups and captchas cost orders of magnitude more than a human just clicking 3 buttons themselves. The task didn't justify the price, so it died. Quietly. No funeral. And that's the pattern repeating across the industry. The moment someone does the math on cost per task, a lot of these shiny AI features suddenly stop making sense. But if you want the clearest signal that the giants were getting nervous, you have to look at the concrete and the steel. The data centers. This is reason number 3, and it's actually where this whole quiet cancelling idea came from in the first place. Back in February of 2025, analysts at TD Cowen noticed something strange. Microsoft, the company that had just promised to spend $80 billion on AI infrastructure, appeared to be quietly walking away from data center leases in the United States. A couple of 100 megawatts of capacity, roughly the equivalent of 2 large data centers, cancelled. It had stopped converting other deals into signed leases. It was pulling back on buying land. The analyst's read was blunt. Microsoft looked like it might be in an oversupply position. It had built its plans around a giant surge of demand, and now that demand signal looked shakier than expected. Microsoft pushed back hard on that interpretation. A spokesperson said the company might strategically pace or adjust its infrastructure, but would keep growing everywhere. And to be fair to them, their spending did keep climbing after that. So this particular scare got overtaken. But it planted the idea in everyone's head, and it planted it for a good reason. Even the true believers were quietly hedging. They were building like the demand was infinite, while privately leaving themselves an exit in case it wasn't. That's not the behavior of people who are certain. That's the behavior of people who are scared of being wrong in either direction. And that fear points straight at the 4th and biggest reason of all. The thing underneath everything else. The whisper that this entire boom might be standing on financial quicksand. The bubble. Here's the part that should make you sit up. A huge chunk of the money flying around, AI isn't really flowing outward into the wider economy. It's circling, round and round, between the same handful of companies. Watch how the loop works. NVIDIA, the chip giant, announced it would invest up to $100 billion into OpenAI. OpenAI takes that money and spends it renting cloud computing from companies like Oracle. Oracle takes that revenue and spends it buying chips from NVIDIA. So money leaves NVIDIA's balance sheet as an investment, travels around the circle, and comes back to NVIDIA as revenue. Everyone's numbers go up. Everyone looks like they're booming. Critics have a name for this. They call it circular financing. And by 2026, analysts were tracking well over $800 billion of these interlocking deals. If that gives you a weird feeling, you're not alone, because it gave Wall Street the exact same feeling. In July of 2026, when it was reported that NVIDIA was discussing a $250 billion backstop to help fund an OpenAI data center campus, CNBC's Jim Cramer put it about as plainly as anyone could. He said he lived through the year 2000, and, in his words, I don't want the sequel. Because this is precisely what the dot-com bubble looked like near the end, companies buying each other's services to inflate the appearance of growth, right up until the music stopped. And here's the number at the center of it all, OpenAI. The poster child of the entire boom, the company everyone points to as proof this is the future. OpenAI was reportedly on track to lose around $14 billion in 2026, nearly triple its losses the year before. Now, they project enormous revenue years down the line, and maybe they'll get there. But the whole tower of spending, the $700 billion, the data centers, the circular deals, a lot of it quietly assumes that demand will show up at a scale that right now simply hasn't. The giants are building the bridge on the bet that the traffic is coming. And every quietly cancelled pilot, every killed product, every capped budget is a little crack in that bet. So let's go back to where we started. The contradiction that wasn't a contradiction. Why are tech giants spending like maniacs on AI while quietly cancelling AI plans everywhere you look? Because they're doing the only rational thing you can do when you genuinely don't know if you're standing at the start of the internet or the start of a bubble. They're spending enormous money on the infrastructure, the chips, the power, the buildings, because being caught short on compute is the one mistake none of them can afford. But they are ruthlessly, quietly killing the individual projects that don't pay off. The pilots that go nowhere. The agents that cost more than a human. The features nobody uses. That's not confusion. That's a company hedging its bets in real time, hoping you only ever see the confident press release and never the graveyard behind it. And here's the lesson buried in all of this. The one that outlives whatever happens next. For 30 years, the story of tech was build it and growth will come. The AI era is quietly rewriting that rule into something harsher. Build it, and then prove every quarter on the balance sheet in cold numbers, that it was actually worth it. Because the difference between the 5% of AI projects that survive and the 95% that get quietly cancelled was never the intelligence of the machine. It was whether a human being could point to the thing and say, honestly, this made us money. Most of them can't. And that's why, underneath the biggest spending spree in the history of business, the quiet cancelling has already begun. So here's what I actually want to know from you. Do you think this is a bubble about to pop, or just the messy, expensive beginning of something real? Drop your answer in the comments, I read them, and the best takes usually end up shaping the next video. If this changed how you're seeing the AI boom even a little, hit like so it reaches someone still buying the hype, and subscribe so you catch the next one. Because this story is very far from over. I'll see you in the next video.